Well, Peter, I'm more concerned with how damaging he is for the Nine network. There was an ugly incident yesterday with Julia Gillard, and Nine CEO David Gyngell was right to say Mark Latham crossed the line and to apologise. The trouble is I'm not sure that Mark Latham knows where the line is. He's not a journalist. He's still full of bile and settling old scores. I don't really think it does 60 Minutes or the network much of a favour, really, to have him posing as a journalist. And certainly when he turned up in the press room today, it was just embarrassing, Peter.
There's really nothing left for me to say, except to note that it seems 60 Minutes is still planning to air some kind of segment next Sunday with Mark Latham as its reporter. He may not be a journalist, Laurie, but then it's a long time since 60 Minutes did much journalism. Welcome to Media Watch. I'm Jonathan Holmes. Last Friday morning, ABC Sydney's Deborah Cameron was chatting about the campaign so far to veteran Liberal strategist Graham Morris.
Why is it that we are being led towards our fears in this campaign instead of towards our dreams?
You should have a talk to your own colleagues, Deborah. The agenda, a lot of the agenda is set by the media.
Well, it's easy to blame the messenger, but there are some areas where the politicians are reacting to problems that the media have helped to turn from molehills into mountains. Like, for example, boat people. Why does a nation of immigrants get so upset over a few hundred or even a few thousand unauthorised boat arrivals? It seems it's a mixture of fear and resentment. The fear is partly aroused by headlines like this.
Invasion.
Up to 800 asylum seekers could arrive in Australian waters during the election campaign, with the Navy bracing itself for an influx of up to 12 illegal boats.
Up to 12 illegal boats. We'll be overrun, swamped, blitzed. When the media says up to, watch out. By page 6, up to 800 asylum seekers had become
an election influx of 8 to 12 illegal boats carrying between 300 and 800 passengers.
Or illegal Centrelink seekers, as 4BC's Michael Smith in Brisbane likes to call them. He's one of the many who fan resentment of asylum seekers however they arrive. They're all queue jumpers, of course, and as soon as they're accepted as refugees, they'll be jumping another queue.
Now, they go straight to the front of the queue for the very best in accommodation in this country at a time when Australians are homeless.
Smith had got hold of a report about homelessness. It showed that most Australian families who ask for emergency accommodation can't be immediately housed.
80% of couples with children are turned away. This is a shocking indictment on us.
Well, Smith's right. It is a shocking statistic. By contrast, he went on,
but asylum seeker, Johnny or Mohammed come lately, who fronts up on the boat front of the queue. The government's laid out the red carpet for asylum seekers.
Not only do they get VIP treatment in detention on Christmas Island and elsewhere, but
then when they graduate, they go straight to the front of the queue for government-funded housing. They get the highest priority there, 13,500 every year.
Now that is just arrant nonsense. For starters, where does that figure 13,500 come from? It's got nothing to do with boat people or asylum seekers. It's the total number of people granted refugee and humanitarian visas each year, the vast majority of whom have been waiting in the so-called queue for years. And when they get here, refugees get no special access to public housing. In fact, most end up in the private rental market. And they get no special Centrelink payments either. The only shred of truth in Smith's claim is that when refugees first arrive or are released from detention, the Commonwealth does
arrange and pay for short-term accommodation, generally for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. It is always in private accommodation, such as homes, apartments, motel rooms.
Well, Australian families looking for emergency housing would no doubt be grateful for 4 to 6 weeks free accommodation. But it's just inflammatory and untrue to say of asylum seekers and their families that
when they graduate from the accommodation that I've just spoken about, they go straight to the top of the queue for public housing.
Yet Smith said it over and over again. No wonder his listeners were infuriated.
I'm just so angry I could go and kick my door out. Missy, I'm so angry. My heart's pounding as soon as I heard you say how many people in houses and everything. I'm ropeable and I'm a very quietly calm person.
What made Smithy's heart pound was when Media Watch asked him to justify his nonsense.
Why does Media Watch exist? Why do they spend our taxes with crap like that? Well, who do you care about, Media Watch? Australian people or Johnny come lately who arrives by boat? Where are your priorities? And our taxes are funding you.
Smithy, our job, a rather hopeless one I agree, is to try to shame people like you into telling your listeners something approaching the truth. You had a perfectly good point to make. If you'd asked why, when the Commonwealth can fund short-term accommodation for refugees, it and state governments can't fund emergency housing for Australian families in need, we wouldn't have had a word to say. But to claim that refugees
Go straight to the front of the queue for government-funded housing. They get the highest priority there, 13,500 every year.
is simply to perpetuate a divisive myth. And then there's all the worry that people have about knives and knuckle dusters. 3 weeks ago, for example, we looked at Seven's attempt to whip up fear about violent youth gangs.
We are here, we are multiplying. They're frightening. It's an urban war zone. We're definitely going to see more attacks.
Public fears about violent crime lead to the familiar law and order auctions in state elections. Now, even the contestants for federal office are joining in.
Julia Gillard vowed to throw the book at importers of knuckle dusters, stun guns and other weapons.
There's no excuse in the world for wandering around with a knife in your pocket.
Tony Abbott wasn't going to be outplayed.
The rise of these violent gangs on a national basis means that there is more work for the Commonwealth to do.
The Australian Institute of Criminology tells us it's not aware of any statistical evidence that gang violence is on the increase. But tell that to Sydney's Daily Telegraph.
A bunch of clowns.
A notorious American youth gang known for its violent street crime and penchant for wearing clown makeup as a disguise has hit Sydney.
The Telly told its readers last week that these three are
Aspiring members of the Sydney branch of youth gang, the Juggalos.
But then it changed its mind. Perhaps it noticed the stars and stripes in the background. The Telegraph Online now describes them as
Juggalo gang members in the US.
Meanwhile, the Melbourne Herald Sun warned its readers
A notorious American youth gang known for violent street crime and wearing clown makeup as a disguise is set to descend on Victoria.
So who are the Juggalos? And what's the evidence that they're a violent youth gang recruiting members in Australia? Well, the story started in a news-limited suburban weekly paper, the Fairfield Advance.
Attack, no joke.
Melissa Matheson. Detectives are investigating 3 young men wearing clown makeup, one made up as the Joker from Batman, and armed with chains, who attempted to rob a woman outside Fairfield RSL Club.
OK, an unpleasant crime. The perpetrators were wearing clown makeup, and the report went on,
Police are investigating if the group is linked to the Juggalo movement, which has been classified as a gang in at least 6 states in the US.
Melissa Matheson had done her homework.
Juggalos and juggalettes are fans of hardcore hip-hop and rap groups, such as Insane Clown Posse and others on the Psychopathic Records label.
Here's an Insane Clown Posse video. It certainly suggests a somewhat antisocial attitude. And though the Juggalos claim they're just fans of the band, it's true, as the Fairfield Advance said, that some Juggalos
have been accused of committing violent acts in America.
But is it true that Sydney police believe that the 3 young suspects in Fairfield, here they are on CCTV issued by the police, may be members of the Juggalos? The Fairfield Advance would only tell us that its source was a police task force member. But Detective Inspector Gary Bailey, crime manager at Fairfield, told Media Watch that he'd never heard of the Juggalos until he read about them in the Fairfield Advance.
I do not have any information arising from the investigation that Juggalo Group are involved in this robbery or any other crime in the Fairfield area.
Then there's the news that the Juggalos gang is about to descend on Victoria. The Herald Sun breathlessly told its readers,
Its looming Victorian get-together will be the group's first national congregation.
Well, on its Facebook page, the
Australian Gathering of the Juggalos
sounds distinctly unthreatening.
Here is our list of items you should think about bringing with you on the camping trip. Toiletries, toothpaste, toothbrushes, dental floss, shampoo,
doesn't mention knives, chains or knuckle dusters. So far, 35 juggalos and juggalettes have said they're coming. Its organiser posted, ironically,
Created this event so all juggalos can get together and hang out and have a few drinks and chill with some music. There will be no criminal activity, we just want to have fun.
But where's the story in that? Meanwhile, our friends at the Northern Territory News know that there's one thing far scarier than either boat people or juggalos.
As big as a truck!
Last Thursday's front page. And inside, this story.
The monster 6.5 metre croc on our front page had to be killed by locals in a remote territory Aborigine community because it was killing their cattle.
That day, we got an email from a viewer with a link to this story in the Cairns Post Online.
The killer of this massive croc, shot in the Albert River near Burketown, remains on the loose.
Same picture, same croc, different state. And the story is dated
December 11th, 2008.
On Friday, the NT News bit back.
Croc pick tug of war.
It insisted that the croc was the territory's own, but it's been dead a long time. The NT News reported that its original informant,
Jada Francis, 23, said he was just a boy when the croc was killed in 1997. My aunt took the photo, he said. He said the little girl in the photo was his cousin, Shay, who posted the photo on Facebook 2 years ago. Someone must have ripped it off and started circulating it in an email, he said.
Which is presumably how it reached the NT News's front page. The online edition of the original yarn does say that the monster croc
was caught in Manangoora, an outstation 56 kilometres east of Borroloola in the mid-90s.
But the story in the hard copy newspaper simply said,
was caught in Manangoora, an outstation 56 kilometres east of Borroloola.
Notice what's missing? Maybe even the NT News wasn't too keen to admit that its scary front-page croc story was 13 years old. In 2 weeks' time, Paul Barry will be presenting Media Watch while I go on long service leave. He last sat in this chair back in 2000, but his Media Watch career was rather rudely cut short after he conducted a bold interview with the ABC's former chairman Donald MacDonald about then Managing Director Jonathan Shire. To ensure that nothing of the sort happens to Paul this time, I'm getting in first. Next week, a special programme. With the media as well as the political world in flux, I'll be interviewing ABC Managing Director Mark Scott. Join me next Monday. Until then, good night.